Here's what's coming up on The World today. Russia admits to attacking a train station in Chaplin in the Dnipropetrovsk region on Wednesday, Ukraine's independence anniversary. Finnish Prime Minister Sanna Marin appeals for people's humanity days after a video of her partying went viral. Plus, Japan's National Police Chief Itaru Nakamura resigns over the assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. A warm welcome for our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world, and thank you for joining me today. I'm Amarachi Ubani in Lagos. Russia's Defense Ministry has confirmed its forces hit a military train at the Chaplin railway station in Ukraine's Dnipropetrovsk region. In its daily briefing, Defense Ministry spokesperson Igor Konashenkov said an Iskander missile had hit a military train at Chaplin and was set to deliver arms to the front line and the eastern Donbass region. Moscow also said it had destroyed 8 Ukrainian fighter planes in strikes against air bases in Ukraine's Poltava and the Dnipro regions. That would be one of the heaviest losses for Ukraine's Air Force in recent weeks. The ministry also said in a statement that Ukrainian artillery had shelled the area of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant 7 times in the last 24 hours. At least 25 people died in that attack on the Chaplin train railway station in Ukraine on Wednesday. Residents of the small town have been mourning their loved ones amongst the rubble of their destroyed homes. One local resident said there was no sound, nothing was heard, just an explosion and a fire that started soon after. Another resident lost her 11-year-old son in the strike. President Volodymyr Zelensky was the one who announced the attack on the train station. He said Russian forces struck twice. One young boy was killed when his house was hit by a missile. Other deaths occurred when rockets hit the railway station and set fire to 5 carriages of a passenger train. He'd already warned on Tuesday of the risk of repugnant Russian provocations on Independence Day, which by chance was also 6 months since Russian forces invaded Ukraine, touching off Ukraine's most devastating conflict since World War II. And in the meantime, Russia's defense ministry has admitted that the Russian military forces continued strikes on Ukrainian forces, including in Donetsk, destroying several command posts and weapons depots. It said the Ukrainian forces called back several combat groups from the front line. The Ukrainian side said the turning point of the conflict has shown up as its armed forces conducted a counteroffensive in another region. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu also said the slowdown in the special military operation was deliberate in a bid to reduce casualties among civilians, and the operation has been proceeding as planned. While the war continues in Ukraine, partners and allies are also looking to rebuilding and rehabilitation of infrastructure in the near future. Britain's Transport Minister Grant Sharp says Britain will share technical expertise with Ukraine as part of a new package of support to help the country rebuild its infrastructure and transport network. In the package, British experts will offer technical knowledge in airports, runway, and port reconstruction that will help identify training opportunities for aviation staff.
Regardless of who becomes the next leader, I can absolutely guarantee is they will be foursquare behind everything that Boris did, which was to lead the world in our support for Ukraine. And so today I've spoken to my opposite number, Alexander Kubikov, who I spoke to on the very first day of the war. He was reminding me in our conference call today, and our support is just as strong as it was then now. And, you know, as I say, that's the reason we're here today. It's all about support for Ukraine 6 months into this war.
In another development, the UN watchdog, nuclear watchdog that is, the IAEA, says it's hoping to be able to go to the Russian-held Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in Ukraine. Chief Rafael Grossi was speaking on French television when he made the comments and asked if talks on gaining access to the facility had succeeded, in which case he had said his agency would go within days. Grossi said they were very close. He had held meetings with the French President Emmanuel Macron earlier in the week. Both had met to discuss the situation at the Zaporizhzhia power plant after numerous exchanges between him and President Macron in recent months, as well as with other parties to assure the safety of the nuclear facility. The United Nations has called for the area to be demilitarized, and its nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency, seeking access to gain access to Zaporizhzhia. Joining me now is associate professor in intelligence studies and head of the Ukrainian program at the Norwegian Defence University College, Tom Rosseth. Thank you for joining me, Professor.
It's a pleasure.
Russia says it's decreased its attacks on Ukraine in order to ease the number of civilian casualties. What are you reading from the comment by the Russian Defense Ministry, and does this imply that Russia had indeed been targeting civilians in its missile strikes?
I think it's several points to that question, and the one issue is that I don't think they have too much sympathy with the civilian casualties in Ukraine, unfortunately. I think the argument is mostly due to the fact that they cannot military muster more forces and personnel, especially in along the front at the moment, and that's why they're slowing now. And it's not due to the possibility of civilian casualties. But as you said, I mean, the missile strikes that they have had over the time previously during this war, and also as we saw yesterday on Independence Day, there's a lot of civilian casualties connected to the missile strikes, unfortunately.
Yeah, and the attacks yesterday on Ukraine's Independence Day, what did you make of them? Strategic, or this was just a normal aspect of the war that's currently going on?
It was not strategic, but and that might come at a later time, as expected by Ukraine, Kyiv government, and also the U.S. intelligence. Well, unfortunately, that's ordinary day with so many casualties, like 25 and 50 wounded on this railway station in Dnipropetrovsk region, and well, it's a important railroad, so it might have some importance, but it's not strategic.
And right now, no side is said to be winning this war, but there is much courage on the Ukrainian side. We heard that much from President Zelensky yesterday. How important is that, for the Ukrainians in this war? And is it enough to turn the tide and give them some advantage against Russia?
High morale and motivation for fighting is essential to defend your country, and for Ukraine this is an existential threat to Ukraine and the government and how they live. So yeah, that's an extremely motivating factor, and it certainly is the most important factor for the Ukrainian defense. But it is also very important that Ukraine gets the tools necessary to defend themselves, and that's only possible now that they have depleted most of their Soviet-era armory, and that is Western weapons and Western ammunition. So together with the high morale and motivation and Western weapon system, it's possible to turn the tide.
And do you agree that the other countries that are supplying Ukraine these weapons, I mean, the United States and Britain, who have been the topmost, who've made the topmost donations to Ukraine militarily, do you believe that they're also fighting this war by proxy? They've received threats from Russia as well, saying that, countries that do help Ukraine during this time will also feel the wrath of the Russian army.
Well, it's a definition issue. I mean, they're not party of the war, but they provide armory, and Ukraine is doing this war with the assistance with weapons from especially the US and UK and some other countries. So whether you define it as a proxy war or not, well, it's the Ukrainians that do the fighting, that they have the losses, they have the fight. So it's not a proxy war per se, but it's well, I understand why some people call it a proxy war.
There's much talk about the IAEA investigators going into the Zaporizhzhia power plants, and Chief Rafael Grossi is hoping to make that trip in a few days to monitor the nuclear reactors and be sure that they're not being tampered with and that everything is still intact, because they're trying to avoid a catastrophe for Europe. But do you think that the plant itself is under attack by either side, Russia or Ukraine?
It's an extremely unfortunate situation, and you have fighting so close to the power plant, and you have well-documented Russian forces inside the plant with the military vehicles and tanks as well. So, and they're shooting on the Ukrainian side, and the Ukrainians are responding, but probably not too close to the power plant. But right now, the power plant is the grid connected to the power plant is turned off, and that's a very potentially dangerous situation if it prolongs. And it's in Russia's interest to turn the power plant on only for the power going to Russia-controlled areas. So I think it's in Russia's interest to damage the connections to the Ukrainian side and then turn it on the Russian side. So that's a strategy, and that's why we're in this situation, I think.
Professor Rosa, thank you so much for your analysis.
Thank you.
Despite harsh living conditions, residents of one frontline Ukrainian town are reluctant to leave their houses and carry on with their desperate lives shadowed by the war. Dominated by an old phenol factory and communist-era apartment blocks, New York, that's New York with an NIU, lies some 50 kilometers to the north from separatist stronghold of Donetsk in eastern Donetsk region. It's also a constant target of Russian shelling. Local residents said they were facing shortages of water, electricity and gas. Having failed to take Kyiv, Russia changed its war aims to focus on securing the Donbass and eastern region formed of two provinces already partly held by its separatist proxies. And that unleashed the most devastating ground battles of the war. Ukraine's government has ordered mass evacuations in Donbass to save civilian lives, but some residents, like Natalia, whom we heard from earlier, during the reports when it was being cut back to New York after being months away from home, are very concerned about the situation. In the meantime, Russian opposition politician and ex-mayor of Yekaterinburg, Yevgeny Roisman, arrived in court today to face allegations of discrediting the Russian army. The offense, newly introduced after Russia's February 24 start of what it calls its special military operation in Ukraine, carries a prison sentence of up to 5 years. Roisman was greeted in the court building by supporters who shouted freedom. He thanked them for coming as he was escorted into court in handcuffs. Roisman's case centers on a Q&A session held on YouTube, according to the prosecution, which asked the judge to impose a number of restrictions on the former mayor, including on leaving his home and using the internet. Roisman's lawyer, former lawyer, speaking outside the court before the hearing, said the case was politically motivated. I want to bring in humanitarian worker and foreign affairs analyst Charles Chukwunaru, who joins us from Canada. Charles, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Amarati. Thank you for having me. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. And it's been 6 months since the invasion of Ukraine. A country's lost so much in terms of people. It's also lost a lot of infrastructure and so much more. But there is no relenting on both sides. In fact, there is renewed zeal in the Ukrainian president. You think he has what it takes to win this war and take the fight into Russian-controlled territory like he's been pledging in the last few days?
Okay, I want to start by saying that the world has crossed the boundary of humanity. We shouldn't be talking about this now. In any case, I think that Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, having failed to take Kiev within the first 2 weeks of the invasion, cannot take it now. By logical extension, Russia cannot take Ukraine now because the capacity of the Ukrainian armed forces to contain the Russians is growing by the day. The Russians implemented option A, it didn't work. Option B, they went to take the Donbas region. The Ukrainians allowed them to come in, get themselves exhausted, hit them on the counter offensive, cut off their supplies chain, cut off their supply, hit their ammo warehouses, hit the Black Sea Fleet, disorganize them, and the Russian forces are finding it difficult to resupply. So it's going to be a war of attrition. It's going to be a ding-dong affair. I don't know how long it's going to last, but I can assure you that Russia will not win the war.
So in your opinion, Ukraine is winning?
Well, if Russia is not winning, the world must stand up, the international community must stand up right now. Whatever they did to resolve the, whatever underground negotiations that the world community did to resolve the Cuban Missile Crisis must be done now.
And
there will be trade-offs, there will be negotiations, but it has to talk because Russia cannot win. Because you cannot win a war of ideology with the barrel of a gun. Ukrainians are fighting for their freedom. It is not even the president. It's not about the president. It is the Ukrainians that are fighting, and the weapons are coming, and they are willing to fight. And their willingness to fight is increasing by the day. They never attacked the Crimea region since Russia annexed it in 2014, but they have the guts to attack it now. They took away an air base in Crimea. It would have been unthinkable before now, but the Ukrainians are doing it. So whatever Russia had in mind is not working. And I know they want to save face. They cannot just withdraw and go back. The world community should come and just like the Cuban, because we are about to cross the boundary of humanity or normalcy. There is nuclear threats involved.
And that's something. If I could come in here, that's something you have been very concerned about, isn't it? The humanity of this war, how people have been displaced, how the fighting has impacted lives around the world. What are you learning about how Ukrainians displaced by the war are settling into, new lives? We saw a report earlier about someone living in, a region, a town just far, some distance away from the Donbas region. What are you learning, about how they're settling in and accepting present conditions as a result of this war?
Well, it's unfortunate that this senseless war that's very avoidable has led to about 6.6 million refugees. That's a refugee crisis. You see, generations are going to be displaced. you're going to see hundreds of thousands of orphans. We're only talking about 6.6 million refugees. We are not even talking about the internally displaced. We are not even talking about the real casualties of the war. It's not even the 90,000 Ukrainian troops that Ukraine is claiming to have killed. It's not even the 5,000 Ukrainian troops that Western media said have been killed. We know that it's way more than that. There is no way Ukrainians can kill people who are retreating and launching a counter-offensive. You cannot be retreating and suffer less casualty than they are advancing force. It's not feasible. So if Ukrainians claim to have killed 90,000, the Russians could have killed about 180,000. That is what is feasible.
Yeah, I just want to quickly ask this, what the lessons we should be learning from this war in Ukraine are.
Well, the lessons for the world is very, very clear. We cannot continue this way. The international system is in a state of anarchy. It is ungovernable. It's becoming too dangerous for everyone. The lesson here is that the world has to change. The war in Ukraine cannot be measured against international law and legal regulation of conflicts, especially when you consider the Fourth Geneva Convention, and you will say that the world is going to remain the same. There is no respect for international laws regulating the conduct of. They have all been broken. So does it mean that the UN has expired? Because the UN system, we have 5 countries who hijack they hijack the UN system, and then we can veto anything. It's not democratic. It's not working. We need to evolve an inclusive world system where the NATO alliance will cease to exist because countries like Russia and China have changed their behavior. The behavior of Russia and China should retire the NATO. Let's have collective, let's start all over again. The UN system has not worked, and it has affected other sub-regional organizations, like in Africa. In Africa, you see what is happening in Tigray. It is the same thing. Nobody is talking about it because it's Africa. You see what is happening in West Africa. What is happening in Sudan? What is the situation in Sudan is trying to escalate. How about West Africa? It appears there is a second scramble for Africa. It's going on right now. Nobody is talking. What lessons have we learned? What lessons have Africans learned? What is the EU doing? It raises issues of food security. The people are busy fighting themselves. Africans should democratize. Liberal democracies are unlikely to go to wars amongst themselves. So look, how many military interventions have we witnessed in Africa in the last couple of years? Nobody is talking. These arms are not manufactured in Africa. There's a second scramble for Africa. Africans should wake up. There is war in Ukraine and there is starvation in Africa. Why are Africans fighting instead of growing their rich farm fields to feed themselves? What lessons have we learned? The economy in Africa is bad. Africa is almost going into war. And these things are influenced from outside. You can see, when was the last time you heard that the president of Russia traveled to Africa? Now he's going to Africa for what? Everybody is going to Africa. Because all the raw materials that is driving the silicon economy that will drive the war is in Africa. And Africa doesn't even know what is going on. They are starving. We knew the new world order. We knew
we'll leave it at that.
From this is that we knew a new world order. Otherwise, the world will self-destruct.
We'll leave it at that, Charles. Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate your analysis on this and other issues as well. Thank you for joining me on the program.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure. And I must commend Channel TV because I can assure you your program is watched by Nigerians all over the world. I get phone calls.
Thank you.
From everywhere in the world. So I must commend you for keeping up to speed with what is happening in the world and especially with what is happening in Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Well, coming up after the break, we'll be hearing up to other stories around the world. The Valley Chief of Police Pete Arredondo fired over delayed police response to the shooting at Robb Elementary School months ago. Stay with us. Welcome back to the program. French President Emmanuel Macron begins his 3-day trip to Algeria as he hopes to end a diplomatic row that will allow him to develop his relationship with young Algerians. However, analysts say the North African country's leaders may prove hard to win over. President Abdelmajid Tebboune wants solid investment commitments, which seem unlikely to be announced this week. And for President Macron to atone for comments he made last year about Algeria's history and its ruling elite. For France, better relations with its former colony are growing more important because an energy shortage due to Russia's war in Ukraine has raised demand for North African gas and because of growing migration across the Mediterranean. Algeria, meanwhile, wants to take advantage of high energy prices to secure big contracts and investment projects, as it's already done with Italy and Turkey, locking in revenues that will help it ride out any lean years in the future. Finnish Prime Minister Sanna Marin fought of tears on Wednesday as she spoke of the fallout from videos of her partying, which started circulating on social media a week earlier. During a press conference where she again addressed the issue, she said, "During these dark times, I as well need some joy, light and fun. And that involves all sorts of photos and videos which I would not like to see, and I know you would not like to see." A Social Democrat leader said she had always performed her official duties. Video clips of the 36-year-old Marin at a party with Finnish celebrities appeared on social media last week and were soon published by several media outlets in Finland and abroad. On Tuesday, she apologized for a picture that emerged from a private party showing two well-known female influencers kissing each other, covering their bare breasts with a Finland sign from the Prime Minister's official residence in Helsinki. Checking in on global weather now, German farmers say due to an ongoing drought, they fear a lower crop yield of up to 50% in 2022 as record temperatures due to Europe-wide heat waves. The lack of rain has negatively affected the growth of crops such as corn, potatoes and hops. Potato farmers like Eric Gossen from Jülich in western Germany faces similar worries about the potato harvest. Walking through the potato field of a friend, he knows that almost all of the plants have died due to the heat. Potato harvest is in September and October, but Gossen fears that the potatoes will not grow any bigger until then. The lack of rain is also affecting southern Germany, with hops farmer Weiner Kreiglameier seeing a 50% decrease in the hops harvest compared to last year. The president of the German Farmers Association, Joachim Rockweed, also anticipates harvest loss for other plants such as sugar beets, which are used to produce sugar. Other parts of Europe, however, and the world face similar problems with high temperatures forcing an early harvest for champagne grapes in France and an ongoing heat wave in China that threatens the crops of Chinese farmers. Meanwhile, in Greece, thunderstorms and heavy rains have led to flooding in parts of the north. Holidaymakers in Toroni, a popular holiday spot on the Chaldiki Peninsula, were forced indoors by the heavy rainfall. A downpour, streets in the town were flooded. A stream washed out parts of a local beach. Across the region, firefighters rushed to help people pump out flooded basements. No injuries were reported, thankfully. Thunderstorms and heavy rain also interrupted daily life in the country's two biggest cities, Athens and Thessaloniki, earlier this week. According to state broadcaster ERT, the recent thunderstorms were particularly intense. Greece is high on the list of recorded deaths of people struck by lightning in Europe. Going into China now, where Typhoon Ma-on, the ninth typhoon of the year, triggered rainstorms and strong winds in South China's Guangdong and Hainan provinces today, and left some roads flooded. Typhoon Ma-on made landfall with a wind speed of up to 118.8 kilometers per hour around 10:30 on the coast of Maoming City in Guangdong province today. In Yangjiang city of Guangdong, more than 300 fishing boats were called back to ports before the typhoon made landfall. South China's Hainan province also felt the effects of Typhoon Ma-on, with rain battering the provincial capital city, Haikou, beginning Wednesday night. Some roads in Haikou were flooded as well this morning, and local authorities have sent people to the site to drain the flooded roads. 6 counties and cities in Hainan are expected to see precipitation of more than 100 millimeters in the next 24 hours, according to the Meteorological Department. As for India, floods triggered by incessant rains in the central part of the country, battering most of the region, destroying crops and paralyzing everyday life for many. That's the situation now, as you can see on your screen. Farmlands as well as residential areas were seen submerged in floodwaters on Wednesday after heavy rains caused the Betwa River to overflow in the city of Vidisha. Farmers say that almost all of their crops have been destroyed because of the heavy rainfall, and hundreds of hectares of agricultural land, mainly wheat, is under water. Authorities say around 300 villages have been affected by the floods. Villagers were seen swimming to reach other villages to get essential items. More than 7,500 people from 9 severely affected districts have been shifted to safer ground. Farming contributes around 15% to India's $2.7 trillion economy, while sustaining more than half of the 1.3 billion population. The situation is no better in Pakistan. The streets and houses in Hyderabad have been inundated in flood water following heavy monsoon rains. Local residents were seen using makeshift boats to navigate through alleys, with pieces of debris seen floating on some. One of them said that their houses and alleys have been turned into a floating garbage bin. One is living in a rickshaw with a family after the roof of her mud house started leaking. Pakistani ministers have urged the international community to help with relief efforts as the South Asian nation struggles to cope with persistent floods occurring nationwide over the past 2 months. Tuvalu's Foreign Minister Simon Kofi says both the United States and China need to be on board to ensure peace and bring action on climate change. He says Tuvalu is mindful when approaching geopolitics in the Pacific. China needs to be involved to address challenges facing his country and the broader region. Kofi grabbed global attention for his nation of 12,000 people last year when he addressed a global climate conference standing ankle deep in seawater to illustrate Tuvalu was sinking.
We're not looking to do anything to China. In fact, we try to avoid them as much as possible. But when we are confronted by them, we're not afraid to speak our minds and to make a stand. But having said that, I think if we're truly serious about world peace and we're really serious about addressing climate change, then there really is no good guys and bad guys in how things are painted at the moment. We need China on board. We need the US on board to address issues that are affecting the world at large. And so that's something that we're also mindful of when we end up, approaching the geopolitics in the region, is that we want China to be on board as well to address many of the issues that we're facing globally.
Return to the United States now, as widow of the late basketball star Kobe Bryant has been awarded $16 million by a jury over the sharing of photos of human remains at the helicopter crash site where her husband, their 13-year-old daughter Gianna, and 7 others were killed in 2020. Vanessa Bryant had sued Los Angeles County, alleging invasion of privacy after accusing members of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's and fire departments of sharing gruesome images of the crash in unofficial settings, including to patrons in a bar. Chris Chester, whose wife Sarah and daughter Peyton were among those killed in the crash and who joined Bryant's lawsuit. They were also awarded $15 million, bringing the total jury award to $31 million. Bryant was in the Los Angeles federal courtroom when the verdict was read out after an 11-day trial. clasped her face in her hands and wept. She and her attorney declined to speak to reporters as they left the courthouse. The Uvalde, Texas school board has fired the school district's embattled police chief for his much criticized handling of the shooting rampage that killed 19 children and 2 teachers in the city 3 months ago. The Uvalde Consolidated Independent School District Board of Trustees voted unanimously to fire Pete Arredondo. He had been on unpaid administrative leave since shortly after the May 24 shooting. Arredondo did not attend the meeting, according to a written statement from his attorney, George Hyde, but he was emailed to board members just before the board met. It cited death threats Arredondo has received, and what it said was the district's lack of efforts to provide any protection for him. Hyde also wrote that the district was in the wrong for dismissing Arredondo, saying it did not carry out an investigation establishing evidence supporting a decision to terminate him. Arredondo has been on unpaid administrative leave since shortly after the shooting.
I further move that good cause exists to ratify the unpaid leave status of Mr. Arredondo starting July 19, 2022. Finally, I move to authorize the superintendent to issue written notice to Mr. Arredondo of this board action, including filing any needed reports required by the termination.
Let's bring in our Washington correspondent, Maria Bird. Maria, great to see you as always. What did Chief Arredondo say in his defense as to why the police delayed in entering the school, if he addressed the issue at all?
Well, as you know, the 7 that in defense, the state officials have to blame as well. And so he was calling out the state officials. He was stating that they were following protocols and procedures. And he was stating that the lack of being able to bring weaponry was one of the major issues. And so he was very outraged, obviously, by this firing and some of the blame that he has been receiving as it relates to the massacre. And he feels that others should have been held accountable as well when it came to the massacre in Uvalde, Texas.
Is news of his sacking of any comfort to the families who lost loved ones in the shooting? I know lots of them blame the police for standing aside and doing nothing. I think for about 3 hours or so, nothing was done. There was no intervention from the security, from police. Parents even offered to go into the school to stop the shooter.
Yes, the families obviously were outraged. If you remember some of the footage of family members actually trying to climb over the gate to go in the school themselves, asking police officers if they could take their guns and go inside of the school to actually make the security and safety of their children and potentially take down the individual that was creating this massacre, the shooter. And so those are, I think, those are the images that most of the individuals, as you talk about the board, that voted to move forward with the firing of the police chief. Those are the individuals that were standing there weeping and obviously stunned by the lack of ability by the police officers to enter the building and to ensure the safety of those students that were in there and the teachers and staff, obviously. And so those individuals obviously are definitely not at all surprised. And they are actually glad to hear that the board has moved in that direction for the firing of the police chief.
And where are we now with investigation into the shooting, into the shooter? Is that closed?
Yes, no, the investigation, you obviously have a federal investigation, you have state investigations with this. And so there's going to be a formal report that will obviously come out here that will provide details into additional things that we don't know as of yet. Furthermore, this will really be kind of a case of precedence to identify how policing should be adjusted in states like Texas and obviously all across the U.S. as it relates to active shooters entering buildings and what is the appropriate protocols to ensure the safety and ability to decrease the number of individuals that are killed within those type of massacres.
Going forward, Maria, how else has this impacted on gun laws in the United States, apart from the bipartisan agreement that was reached a few weeks ago?
Well, the bipartisan bill, I think, is going to be a first step. Obviously, when you hear any type of school shooting, school massacres, that is brings the heightened interest in the moving forward, not only by legislators, but also local government officials. And so it kind of has a grassroots approach to it. And so I think what we'll begin to see is within school systems, we'll begin to see new protocols in place. We're actually seeing an increased number of community police officers being at the schools this upcoming school year. So we'll begin to see another resurgence of focusing again on community policing and allowing officers to have weapons within schools, and also allowing officers to be able to patrol the exterior perimeters of the school, and putting protocols in place to ensure that police are able to quickly respond to these type of incidents.
Thanks again for the updates, Maria.
Thank you.
We're off on another break now, still ahead of the program. It's a first for Côte d'Ivoire, a smartphone that speaks 16 local languages, improving digital access for the population. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're on the last lap of the program. Israel, has indicted a senior leader of the Iran-backed Islamic Jihad movement, whose arrest led to the brief conflict in Gaza earlier this month, and whose detention is likely to fuel tensions. The charges against Bassem al-Saadi, who was arrested on August 1st during a raid in the occupied West Bank city of Jenin, include serving in an illegal organization and incitement, according to a statement from the Israeli military. Anticipating retaliation to al-Saadi's arrest, Israel launched what it called preemptive strikes against this group in the Gaza Strip, where it is based, leading to 3 days of Israeli airstrikes and Palestinian rockets. He's been held in an Israeli military prison. Al-Saadi, according to the military, is an influential senior official in Islamic Jihad who, it's said, worked on core terrorist activities that include receiving funds from Gaza. The Taliban says it's not found the body of Ayman al-Zawahiri and are continuing investigations. The group spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid said this today after the United States said they killed the al-Qaeda leader in an airstrike in Kabul last month. The United States killed Zawahiri with a missile fired from a drone while he stood on a balcony at his hideout in July, according to U.S. officials. It's the biggest blow to al-Qaeda since U.S. Navy SEALs shot dead Osama bin Laden more than a decade ago. And a Pakistani court has extended former Prime Minister Imran Khan's pre-arrest bail for 1 week in a terrorism case over his speech. His lawyer made this known shortly after the former premier appeared in court in person amidst tight security. Khan's lawyer and political aide Babar Awan says bail had been granted until September 1st, after which they will apply for another extension. Former Prime Minister maintained after the hearing he had said nothing wrong in the speech last week. Police filed charges on Saturday against the former cricket star and national team captain Khan over what they said was a threat when he spoke about police torture of an aide who faces sedition charges for inciting mutiny in the military. Political tensions in Pakistan remain high as Khan rallies support for elections that are not due until October next year. And Rohingya refugees have rallied in a camp in Bangladesh, marking 5 years since the start of a brutal military crackdown in Myanmar that forced more than 730,000 people to flee across the border. A vast majority fled to the Bangladeshi border town of Cox's Bazar. During a military crackdown in 2017, the United Nations has said was carried out with genocidal intent. Myanmar denies genocide, saying it was waging a legitimate campaign against insurgents who attacked police posts. More than 1 million Rohingya are living in squalid camps in southern Bangladesh, comprising the world's largest refugee settlement, with little prospect of returning to Myanmar, where they're mostly denied citizenship and other rights. Japan's National Police Agency Chief Itaru Nakamura says he will resign to take responsibility for the murder of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, citing the need for a fresh start for the organization and its security duties. Nakamura told a news conference earlier today that in order to prevent such an incident from happening again under a new system, he believes it's necessary to firmly implement measures based on a new security plan. He's the most senior official to step down in connection with Abe's assassination at a campaign rally in the western city of Nara on July 8th, where experts have said security was seriously flawed. Security experts say bodyguards could have saved the former prime minister by shielding him or pulling him down from the line of fire in the 2.5 seconds between the missed first shot and the second fatal round of gunfire. Nara Police Chief Tomoaki Onizuka also announced his resignation today. Well, if you can't read or write, you might need a talking smartphone as your best friend. An entrepreneur in Côte d'Ivoire has been thinking about this. He's designed a smartphone that's called OpenG. Here it is.
An entrepreneur in Ivory Coast has created the country's first locally made smartphone, which aims to improve accessibility with voice commands in local languages for users who can't read nor write. The phone, called OpenG, went on sale last month in the West African country. It can understand commands and respond in 16 of Ivory Coast's approximately 60 spoken languages. Founder Alain Capochichi said he was inspired to create the phone after watching his parents, who are illiterate, struggle to use a smartphone.
In Africa, the problem we have is that reading and writing is not accessible to everyone. People can just use their smartphones much more easily by simply speaking to them.
OpenG's developers say they've already sold several thousand units after only a few months on the market. At an electronics shop in the commercial capital, Abidjan, customers eagerly tested various OpenG models using only the sounds of their voices. Lansine Touré was one of such customers who ultimately decided to buy the phone for himself.
Everyone as an Ivorian should have one because it will evolve. But to evolve takes capital, and it is us, the Ivorians, who must take up this initiative because it is just the beginning.
Capochichi believes such technology is key to bringing Ivory Coast's undereducated population into the digital economy and will ultimately encourage nationwide developmental strides.
We don't need to alphabetize people. We don't need to teach them to read and write. We just need to take them as they are and insert them in the economic life.
The phone is driven by a series of apps accessed through a similar interface to that of Apple's Siri or Amazon's Alexa. As long as a language is pre-selected, users can order their device to initiate basic functions like sending calls or SMS messages, or even initiate mobile money transfers by speaking in their local dialects.
Well, can't say you can't read or write or use a smartphone. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi. Bye.